Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Lidag Revelazian. Coming up in today's newscast. The war on Gaza, day 24. The IDF ground operation continues to expand as the IDF reiterates its call on civilians to move south. On the northern front, the IDF continues to strike Hezbollah terror targets in response to missiles fired into Israel from Lebanon. And a pro-Palestinian mob in the Dagestan region of Russia stormed the airport, searching to attack and kill Jews and Israelis arriving on an inbound flight. The IDF ground maneuver continues to make progress in northern Gaza on day 24 of the war to end Hamas rule. More troops have entered the Gaza Strip in the past day as the military continues to expand its ground operation. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
The IDF expanded its ground operation in Gaza with more troops entering the enclave to directly confront Hamas fighters trying to slow down Israeli advances. Overnight, troops eliminated dozens of terrorists who barricaded themselves in buildings and tried to attack the forces that were moving in their direction, with the clashes ongoing. In one case, ground forces directed the Air Force to carry out a drone strike on a Hamas staging ground, killing more than 20 operatives. In another incident, the IDF says a fighter jet struck an anti-tank guided missile launching site and hit a number of Hamas operatives near the al-Azhar University in Gaza City. The barrage is continuing from the air. The IDF says that over the past day it has carried out strikes against some 600 Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip, including weapons storage sites, hideouts, and staging grounds.
הלחימה הקרקעית בצפון רצועת עזה ממשיכה. אנחנו מתקדמים בשלבי המלחמה על פי תוכנית. אנחנו מרחיבים בהדרגה את הפעילות הקרקעית ואת היקף הכוחות שלנו ברצועת עזה.
Hamas hides in tunnels under hospitals, and the patients above are used as human shields. The Palestinian Red Crescent said it had received warnings from Israeli authorities to immediately evacuate Al-Quds Hospital, and that raids conducted on Sunday had taken place just 50 meters from the facility. The IDF is urgently warning civilians to head south, and Israel allowed at least 30 aid trucks carrying food, water, and medicine to enter from the Rafah crossing with Egypt in the largest convoy since the start of the conflict. Israel says its offensive is aimed at destroying Hamas military and governing capabilities and has vowed to eliminate the entire terror group, which rules the Strip. The IDF is targeting all areas where Hamas operates while seeking to minimize civilian casualties.
And over 1,400 people were massacred by Hamas in what has been called one of the most savage and brutal attacks in history, worse than even ISIS. Even today, over 3 weeks later, there are still bodies that are so badly disfigured or burned that forensic teams have still not been able to identify them. Joining us now with more on the process of identifying the victims is Moshe Melayev from the 360 National Rescue Unit. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So you've been working really around the clock to try and identify the bodies of those massacred. Can you maybe walk us a little bit through the process that it takes to identify a body?
Sure. So I start to volunteer at the 360 unit at Sunday, like day after the attack. And I came to Camp Shura. This is where they're gathering all the victims. So what happened there, it's the trucks comes to the camp. Every truck, approximately 50 victims' bodies inside. And we need to unload it from the truck and open the bag and take fingerprints, take a picture of the face. And then it's go to DNA, to have a DNA test. Because most of the soldiers and bodies are like civilians even, it was very hard to identify them. Because they was born and they shoot people on the head. Like, I heard that I was in the Netiva Asara. The commander over there told me that there was 20 people get shot over there, died, murdered in Netiva Asara. And they said that each body, they shot him like 6, 7, 8 times in the head. Like, there's nothing left to identify. So it was very, very horrible, very hard to do. And by staying there at the Shura camp, I understand the atrocity that's been there in the south of Israel.
And you said that you came to volunteer. I understand that this unit is comprised of mainly volunteers. Is that right?
Yeah, we all volunteers. We are specialized on. First of all, most of us are medic. We make a course with the Pikud Oref. They teach us how to take people out of ruined buildings or things like that. And also we have a chosen, which is mentally help, physically help, and mentally help also.
Absolutely. I can't imagine what it's like to see the bodies of the victims. Can you maybe share with us just maybe one story of a body that you've helped to identify?
Sure. I'll tell you about the first body I took out from the truck and opened the bag. I think that was, this is the image that I never forget in my life. It was very light bag. I took it by myself out from the truck. I put it on the table. That's the picture you see right now. This is exactly what I did. And I put the body on the table. We opened the bag, and she was maybe 5 or 6 years old girl, blonde hair, blue eyes, with a terrifying look at her face, with a shot on her head. That was very, very difficult for me. And it was the first body, actually. Everything I saw later wasn't so bad like this, the first body that I took out.
Wow, very difficult to hear. And how many bodies today are still left to identify?
We don't know exactly. They said it's 200 bodies, and plus we have 100 more missing people. So we don't know exactly how many left in our hands.
Moshe, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and share these stories.
Of course.
And really for all the work that you're doing.
I want to take the opportunity and thanks my unit, thanks my commanders and the managers, everybody who's took a part on this job. We have Elchanan Roth, the chief commander. We have Israel Morgenstern, Chezi Shaveks. I want to thank them very much for having take care of us. First of all, the volunteers to do our job, and they give us psychologists, psychiatrists, so we can talk to them, and they help us very much. So thank you very much for all the volunteers.
Thank you to all the volunteers and to you as well, Moshe. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And moving on, Hamas has released new footage of 3 Israeli hostages in its latest act of psychological warfare. And tragically, President Yitzhak Herzog confirmed today that Shani Luke, the German-Israeli girl taken into Gaza from the Nova Music Festival, was found beheaded by Hamas. Meanwhile, all this as an incoming rocket fire from Gaza continues, and Israel continues to bury its dead. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
Hamas released a video on Monday in which 3 kidnapped Israeli women appealed to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and blamed him for October 7th. This is the latest tactic of psychological warfare employed by Hamas. The 3 women are currently being held under duress, casting doubt on their words. Also on Monday, the family of Shani Luke confirmed her death. Shani was the German-Israeli girl who was dragged into Gaza and paraded half naked as she was presumed dead while Palestinians spit upon her and uploaded the entire scene to social media. Israeli President Yitzhak Herzog confirmed to the German news site Bild that Shani had been found in Gaza, beheaded by Hamas. Meanwhile, families of Israeli hostages held by Hamas are pleading that the safety of their loved ones must be a top priority for the Israeli government as the military expands ground operations in the Gaza Strip.
We are just hoping that Netanyahu and all the other politicians and the people that get this decision won't forget the hostages and will think about them before any decision that they are making.
I ask the authorities here and all the international community to keep pushing and to keep doing whatever they can We need those people back home. My grandmother doesn't have the time to wait. She needs to be back home now.
And looking to the northern front, the IDF continues striking Hezbollah terrorist positions in response to rocket, mortar, and anti-tank fire into northern Israel. The IDF also struck a terrorist position in Syria. Rockets were fired at Israel, but there has been no uptick in attacks since the IDF launched its ground offensive into Gaza. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
The cross-border fire from Lebanese Hezbollah terrorists has been continuing, but there has been no noticeable uptick in attacks since the start of the IDF ground operation into Gaza. Air defenses intercepted several of the projectiles, while others landed in open areas. Rockets were launched from Lebanon at the upper and western Galilee. One rocket fired last night scored a direct hit on a home in Kiryat Shmona, but it did not cause any injuries. The IDF said a drone strike was carried out against the terror cell that launched those rockets, and the fighter jets hit Hezbollah position in response to an attack. The IDF also struck 2 terror cells in southern Lebanon, preparing to carry out anti-tank guided missile attacks against northern Israel. 6 Israeli soldiers and at least 47 Hezbollah fighters and 6 Palestinian terrorists have been killed in the 3 weeks of exchanges. In a tragic accident, a reserve soldier deployed near the northern border was killed, and 2 others seriously injured when a tank overturned. Meanwhile, the IDF said it struck rocket launchers in Syria that were the source for recent cross-border fire. Israeli strikes were reportedly near Dara in southern Syria. Further north in Syria, U.S. airstrikes targeted an Iranian militia. The airstrikes reportedly hit the terrorist position hours after U.S. forces in Deir ez-Zor were targeted.
And a border police officer was seriously wounded in a stabbing attack in Jerusalem Monday morning. The suspect was apprehended by police. This attack comes as Israel police remain on high alert for terror activities in the wake of the Gaza war. And in Judea and Samaria, 3 Palestinian terrorists were killed during heavy clashes in the Palestinian city of Jenin. It's part of a widespread operation against Palestinian terror cells in terror hotbeds in Judea and Samaria. The crackdown has been ongoing since October 7th. More from ILTV's William Sharon.
IDF forces entered the terrorist hotbed city of Jenin and clashed with armed men. During the operation, the IDF deployed a drone that was used to attack and eliminate a number of armed terrorists. One of the dead men was identified as Wahim Hanoun, a founder of the Islamic Jihad offshoot of the Jenin Brigade. It's part of a widespread operation against Palestinian terror cells in Jenin and in other terror hotbeds in Judea and Samaria. This is to ensure that Hamas is well contained during the IDF operation in Gaza. Meanwhile, in Nablus, the IDF carried out a demolition of the home of the terrorist who murdered 3 members of the Israeli-British D family 7 months ago.
And in a horrific scene Sunday night, reminiscent of Holocaust-era anti-Semitism and pogroms, hundreds of Russians stormed an airport in Russia's Dagestan region in an attempt to attack Jews and Israelis arriving to the country. Let's take a look. Hundreds of pro-Palestinian supporters stormed an airport in the southern Russian Republic of Dagestan, a predominantly Muslim region, on Sunday in an attempt to attack Jews and Israelis on an inbound flight arriving from Tel Aviv. The protesters can be seen pouring onto the airport's runway in videos widely circulating on social media, searching the Red Wings airline. In other videos, protesters can be seen storming the airport terminal searching for Jews. The protesters also blocked the exit from the airport and searched the cars of all those attempting to leave. Following the incident, Russian authorities shut down the Makachkala airport and flights were diverted to other airports in Russia. But protesters did not give up. Also going to a nearby hotel, breaking into rooms and checking every room for Jewish or Israeli travelers. And in a separate incident, the Jewish communal center in Nalchik, Dagestan, was also set ablaze in what is reminiscent of Holocaust-era anti-Semitism. In response to the incident, the Prime Minister's Office, Foreign Affairs Ministry, and National Security Council released a joint statement saying Israel expects the Russian legal authorities to safeguard the well-being of all Israeli citizens and Jews wherever they are, and to take strong actions against the rioters and against the wild incitement directed towards Jews and Israelis. And joining us now with more on the recent anti-Semitic incident in Russia and on the global rise in anti-Semitism today is Israel's Special Envoy for Combating Anti-Semitism, Michal Kotler-Wunsch. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So what we witnessed last night in Russia was reminiscent of an attempted pogrom. I mean, can you now say this was an anti-Semitic attack, point blank, and not related to anti-Zionism or anti-Israel sentiment, as many would like to claim?
So we have to be very clear. Anti-Semitism is one and the same. The same anti-Semitism that fueled the atrocities of October 7th is the unfathomable anti-Semitism that then excuses, justifies, or denies the atrocities of October 7th, and in turn is the anti-Semitism that we have seen all over the world, as you said, in Russia last night, in Paris today, on the streets of Berlin, on the streets of New York, Washington, and on campuses around North America, that not only denies and justifies, but that hails Hamas, that calls the same charter that Hamas is committed to for the annihilation of the state of Israel and for the murder of Jews. It is one and the same anti-Semitism. And you touched upon the differentiation, which over time has let people sort of differentiate between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, except that October 7th pulled off a lot of masks, and among them is the mask that makes very clear that anti-Zionism is the modern mainstream strain of an ever-mutating hate, that is anti-Semitism, that has fueled this complete dedication for the murder of Jews and for the annihilation of their nation state. And that is what we have in front of us, not only in the atrocities of October 7th in Israel, but in the rest of the world as a response.
So as you said, we're not only seeing this in Russia, we're seeing it around the world in the streets of major cities, on college campuses. But many are saying, well, this isn't anti-Zionism, it isn't anti-Semitic, it's anti-Israel, an anti-Israel government policy. I mean, how do you respond to that?
Well, I want to make very clear, anybody that cannot condemn the atrocities, the war crimes, the crimes against humanity, the makings of genocide of October 7th, burning of babies, of families, rape of women, the bludgeoning, the murder, the abduction of hundreds, anybody who cannot condemn that has basically outed themselves as those that support this attack on our shared humanity, on civilization, not just on the state of Israel, the nation state of the Jewish people, and not just on Jews on that bloody Shabbat, and on Jews around the world as a result. And I want to make something very clear. We have a definition of anti-Semitism, and it includes the modern version of it, the mutated strain of it, of anti-Zionism. That definition, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition, speaks of the dehumanization and the delegitimization and the double standards towards the proverbial Jew among the nations, that is the nation state. The dehumanization, the delegitimization, the double standards that enable the atrocities of the Holocaust, barring the individual Jew from an equal place in society, is precisely what we are seeing in international institutions, on the streets of major cities, on university campuses, that has just morphed into this mutated strain of anti-Semitism that bars the Jewish nation state from an equal place in the family of nations. And we would be remiss if we don't absolutely pull the masks off and say it is one and the same. The same anti-Semitism that enabled the atrocities of the Holocaust is the anti-Semitism that enabled the atrocities of October 7th, and the anti-Semitism that fuels the responses that deny, that justify, that celebrate them, and that never again is right now.
And we're seeing so much anti-Semitism around the world, and I want to ask you, where do you see the root of this anti-Semitism coming from today? Where is the main source, the main cause of this anti-Semitism that we're seeing over the last 3 weeks and before that?
So it's not just the last 3 weeks. I'll say that it's decades long of the mutation of this hate that, as I said, fueled in the past the atrocities too awful to imagine, but not too awful to have happened during the Holocaust, and the understanding that that same mutation that turned Zionism into racism with what we know of as the infamous 1975 UN resolution, Zionism is racism that is alive and well on university campuses around North America and the rest of the world, that turned Israel after the 2001 Durban Conference Against Racism, which was an anti-Semitic hate fest, into an apartheid state, that in an Orwellian inversion turned Israel into a genocidal, colonialist country, when in fact the state of Israel is the nation state of Jews, a prototypical indigenous people returned to an ancestral homeland after thousands of years of exile and persecution. And so what has happened over decades all came to a head and intersected and exploded on October 7th. And it happened in various different sort of arenas. I said international institutions, the UN. We know that including Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who reminded the world that October 7th did not happen in a vacuum. And I want to ask him, did 9/11 happen in a vacuum? Did the Holocaust happen in a vacuum? Because that's what happened here on October 7th. And then, of course, morphed into university campuses, actually weaponizing international law and human rights. Human rights, as we know, the secular religious of our time, in order to demonize and delegitimize and apply double standards to the state of Israel, the Jewish nation state. We're the proverbial Jew among the nations. And of course, social media platforms. We would be remiss if we didn't mention those. And the anti-Semitism, which obviously what happens online does not remain online, which fuels and enables what we see then on the streets and on campuses and in every single space.
And now, the Israeli Wine Producers Association has launched a new campaign asking people to take a sip for solidarity with Israel. 10% of the proceeds will go towards humanitarian relief in Israel, and the initiative also seeks to help the Israeli wine industry, which is taking a significant hit during the ongoing war. ILTV's Deva Klein has the report.
The Israeli Wine Producers Association is asking consumers of wine abroad to take a sip for solidarity with Israel. This unique initiative seeks to raise awareness and provide support for Israel and Israeli wineries who are suffering a financial blow due to the ongoing war. As such, when a consumer now buys a bottle of Israeli wine, 10% of the proceeds will go towards Israeli humanitarian relief efforts. According to the association, the October 7th massacre has had an immediate, concrete impact, particularly on picking, sorting, and winemaking teams. Harvest had begun shortly before the attacks, which meant that the sorting, crushing, and fermentation processes were, in many cases, done under the constant threat of attack and bombardment. For many wineries, production teams have been hollowed out as the young men and women who normally would be shepherding the crucial winemaking process have called up to the reserves. Joshua Greenstein, the vice president of the association, explained that unlike other industries where you can pause production or run with limited staff, winemaking has its own schedule. Israel's wine region is perhaps the oldest wine-producing region in the world, and until the October 7th massacre by Hamas, has been able to blend this ancient history with the most modern tech to produce some of the finest wines available. It was becoming one of the fastest-growing winemaking regions in the world, only to now face crisis.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Mostly clear skies expected tonight throughout the country, with temperatures reaching lows of 21 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, temperatures rise alongside scattered showers in the north with highs of 30 degrees Celsius or 87 degrees Fahrenheit. And now, more than 1,400 babies, children, elderly men, women, soldiers were murdered in cold blood by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. And over 200 people remain in Hamas captivity. The scale of tragedy is so large that we cannot mention every name right now, but we will slowly share their stories and ensure that their memories live on. Not a single Israeli has not been impacted by the horrific events of October 7th, and today, all of Israel stands together and mourns. And that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channel, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, iltv.tv. with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm the Darga Velazi. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.